Hi there! Just as our body is in need of material food daily, so as our spirit or our soul is in need of God's daily manna. One time, I visited a grocery store and I saw a mom holding her child. The both of them were walking around, picking up some things and place all those they picked up in their basket. When suddenly, I heard the boy started screaming, "Mama, I like this." And the mom said, "No, my child, we don't have money for that. That's not part of our budget." And the boy insisted. He said, "No, I want this." And then the mom said with a very calm voice, "No, my child, no, my child. It's not part of what we intended to come here." And the boy kept on insisting, and so I left because the mom saw me. I left and then went around to find the very object that I was there for. When out of nowhere, the child started shouting all the more and he started crying. And so I could not help anymore, but became like a marites a little bit of that. So I tried to find where they were. And when I found that section where they were, I saw the boy lying down on the floor, shaking and squeezing his feet and legs. And then he was shouting, "I want that, I want that," and he was crying. And the mom looked at him, grabbed his hand. This time, she was already very angry. And you know what she said? "Nakakahiya ka. Nakakahiya ka." And thinking about that, the act of the boy showed that the act of the boy, that action that he did, made his mom feel ashamed of what was happening. And I think this kind of scenario can also be related with how God felt in relation to the actions of His people, Israel, and even of Moses if you look at the book of Numbers. Let's look at Numbers chapter 20, beginning with verse 1 up to verse 13. I'll read from the NASB version, and it says here, "Then the sons of Israel, the whole congregation, came to the wilderness of Zin in the first month. And the people stayed at Kadesh. Now Miriam died there and was buried there. There was no water for the congregation, and they assembled themselves against Moses and Aaron. And the people thus contended with Moses and spoke, saying, 'If only we had perished when our brothers perished before the Lord. Why then have you brought the Lord's assembly into this wilderness for us and our beasts to die here? Why have you made us come up from Egypt to bring us into this wretched place? It is not a place of grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, nor is there water to drink.' Then Moses and Aaron came in from the presence of the assembly to the doorway to the tent of meeting and fell on their faces. Then the glory of the Lord appeared to them, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, 'Take the rod, and you and your brother Aaron assemble the congregation and speak to the rock before their eyes, that it may yield its water. You shall thus bring forth water on them out of the rock, and let the congregation their beast drink.' So Moses took the rod from there, and the Lord, just as he had commanded him. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly before the rock, and he said to them, 'Listen now, you rebels. Shall we bring forth water for you out of this rock?' Then Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and the water came forth abundantly, and the congregation and their beasts drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, 'Because you have not believed me to treat me as holy in the sight of the sons of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them.' Those were the waters of Meribah, because the sons of Israel contended with the Lord, and He proved Himself holy among them." What happened here was that the Israelites again complained. And I think Moses was really not in a good mood this time because her sister just died and was buried. And he was still probably mourning during this time, and the Israelites whom he was leading started complaining again, just as how they had done several times in the past in this journey from Egypt to the land of Canaan. They kept on complaining. And so Moses went to the Lord, and then the Lord instructed him to go and take the rod and bring the assembly there and to speak to the rock so that the rock will provide water for his people. But Moses, if you look at verse 12, what did he do? Moses raised his voice and raised his hand, and he struck the rock 2 times. What was God's instruction? God told him, you speak to the rock. But Moses struck the rock. And this was seen by the entire assembly. The people of God saw this happen. And I want us to take note of that because oftentimes we would say that God punished Moses because he struck the rock. But actually it wasn't the main reason. It was just part of it. Because if you look at verse 12, toward the end of it, and then the Lord said to him, because you have not believed me to treat me as holy in the sight of the sons of Israel. Take note of the statement, because you have not believed me and you did not treat me holy. The idea of believing, and the believing here had to do with God's instruction telling him, you speak to the rock. And then Moses, instead of speaking to the rock, he struck the rock. So the idea of believing had to do with obeying what God told him to do. He did not obey God. He struck the rock instead of just speaking to it. So what happened here is that out of that disobedience, out of that unbelief, not unbelief really, but out of that action that wasn't consistent with what God instructed him to do, God was displeased because he was not treated as holy. He was not treated as someone who's being revered so highly. You know, this is a very important matter in our lives. As we look at the story that we have read, Moses, if he just followed the instruction of God, the act of following God's instruction could be his way of honoring God, revering him. And just as that little boy in the grocery store that I had told you about, the mother felt ashamed about what happened. Why? Because the boy was not following her instructions. The boy was not obeying what she was telling him to do. And so she felt ashamed of the situation. In that same sense, if we don't follow what God is telling us, we bring shame to the Lord. If we don't follow what God is telling us to do, then we are not actually revering the Lord the way we ought to revere Him. And for this day, I am praying that we would learn to abide in His words, to obey what He says, because obeying Him is a way of honoring Him. God bless you, and may God continue to speak into our hearts this very day.